Hello there, and welcome to the Nihil channel. This channel is dedicated to SRPGs like Fire Emblem, Shining Force, Lost Eidolons, and any other SRPG that you can imagine. So if that's your thing, stick around and stay tuned. Yesterday, Nintendo announced Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, which is going to be Fire Emblem 18. That is crazy that the series I grew up playing has been going this long. Anyway, it's a sequel to Fire Emblem Three Houses. And I say sequel because at the end of the trailer, Sothis appears and says,
"The years were long, weren't they? Have you forgotten me so soon?"
and I think that's a message to an off-screen character, but I think it's also a message to you and me, the player of the game, that it's only been a couple of years since Three Houses. You haven't forgotten us yet, have you? I really like the look of the trailer for Fortune's Weave. I like a lot of the character designs, I like the music, and most of all, the setting. But something about the setting struck me as kind of familiar. But how could that be? 7 years ago, Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia had been out for a little while, and all of us Fire Emblem fans started to speculate. What could the next game look like? An anonymous 4chan user weighed in on the discussion, basically saying, "My uncle works at Nintendo, and I have seen the next Fire Emblem game. I have seen Fire Emblem 16. He told us it is dark, it is about religion, it has gothic horror themes, and baby, it's got vampires." It sounded ridiculous. Until yesterday.
It is imperative that I face it again. I must cull it with this blade. My full strength. And now warm blood is served in a crude cup.
This is probably the best place for me to put a disclaimer for people who are not going to listen to the full video and say, I don't think that the leaker knows everything there is to know about Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. I don't think these leaks are 100% accurate. What I am putting forward is that I think this leaker may have seen a very early version of a game that eventually became Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. He makes a lot of claims that I think hit a little bit too close to home and are far too specific. Let's explore why together. The leaker tells us that the story has a gothic horror theme. It's darker and more mature, but not rated M, more like the Jug Draw games, which is Fire Emblem 4 and 5. We know this is not fully true, because we've seen that whole Greco-Roman thing that the game has going on, which I adore, but Dietrich's faction does seem to have kind of a gothic horror thing going on. We're told that there's two sides, the humans and the Kabari. I don't know if this is going to boil down to two sides or if it's going to be four. We're told that our avatar plays a more villainous role and is a Camus-like anti-hero. Dietrich does look kind of like Camus, he is a blue unit that we are in control of, and he does have convoy access. The other three characters shown also have convoy access, so I'm not entirely sure if we're going to be able to pick different routes and have different main characters, but it does seem like we have at least one more villainous character who has convoy access. That leads me to believe that this might be true. The last part of the story thing that the leaker leads with that I think is really interesting is he tells us that the Fire Emblem is a sundial. It gathers energy from the sun and the moon and can either empower or destroy the Kabari. Both sides are seeking it. Now, I don't know whether the Fire Emblem is going to be a sundial ultimately, but if I only was looking at some stills of this, if I had not seen the game in motion, and I saw this little blaze meter that had half of it being orange and half of it being purple, I might say something like, there's an energy thing with the sun and the moon. I don't know. It seems kind of like a weird coincidence that this guy says that this is going to be in here, and we have the blaze gauge. The next thing he talks about I think is one of the weaker points, but it's the humans. We're told that our protagonist is a boy named Elaine, who is a knight-errant class and uses a sword. He upholds the dominant religion and firmly believes in it. He learned to see the Kabari as a threat, and his mission is to unite the humans in a war against the Kabari. Obviously, Elaine is not the name that ended up in the final version. His name is Kai, and I think this might be Kai because names change in development all the time. It seems like one of the easiest things to change, especially for a main character whose name is never going to be read aloud. It's funny to look back to 7 years ago to people's reaction to this leak, and there was a lot of laughing at, they're not going to focus that heavy on religion, you know, especially the main character is not going to be somebody that works for the church and tries to defend it and defeat the enemies of the church. That would be crazy. We're also told that he's joined by Huan, who is our Jagan, a laid-back great knight past his prime, who aids Elaine on his mission. To me, this is a super safe prediction. Almost every Jagan is some sort of great knight or paladin past his prime who aids our young hero on his mission. The next interesting one, though, to me, is this character Gwendolyn, who's a Myrmidon and self-proclaimed Kibari hunter. I think that the name could have been changed because we already have a Gwendolyn, and I think this could be the character Lita. I think this because she says,
"There's a man I hate so much that simply killing him will not satisfy me. For that reason, I refuse to die."
Now, this is totally a guess based on just the information that we have, but I think she could be seeking out Dietrich. I think he could be the man she's talking about. I also feel like a lot of the Three Houses characters end up being a little bit one-note, unfortunately, and if I had to sum Lita's character up in one sentence, it does seem to be self-proclaimed vampire hunter, or at least self-proclaimed something hunter. I'm not quite sure yet. The last character on this page is Godfrey, class unknown, a knight said to resort to extreme measures. This tells us absolutely nothing. I don't really have any kind of comment on it. That could mean absolutely anything. The next page has the most important part of the leak, in my opinion, the Kibari characters. We're told that we're going to have a character named Dracul, who is an avatar, and this confuses me because we're told that Elaine is our protagonist, but now there's an avatar as well? I think this kind of works with what Fortune's Weave ends up looking like, because we seem to have 4 protagonist avatar characters. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to be handled, if it's different routes or not, but all 4 characters that we've been shown do have convoy access, and that normally is something reserved for the main character. We're told that Dracul is a vassal class and a Camus-like antihero. He's a bastard prince or princess, and you might be able to choose his personality. I think this is the most important part of the leak because we have never had vampires in Fire Emblem before. It is the biggest claim to make, and you might still be fighting me that we don't know he is a vampire.
And now warm blood is served in a crude cup.
My man looks exactly like Alucard, and talks about blood. I don't know what more you need. The rest of these characters, Morella, Maruna, and Felix, I really have no comment on. We haven't been shown any character in the trailer that I would say immediately these track onto, so moving on. The next part of the leak is classes, and I think this may have changed a lot in development. Knight Errant, Elaine's class, mounted, sword, gains lances on promotion. We did get a main character that is mounted, and he does have a sword in his inventory, but I'm not quite sure that this is what was being put forward. You know, I would have been a lot more impressed if he said he rides some sort of dinosaur ostrich thing, but, you know. He also says there's going to be a hunter. He puts that second. Well, look at that. That's what Lita is. The next thing he says is that there is a monk. Okay, well, we hadn't seen actual Fire Emblem 16 yet, 3 houses, and we did get monks. He says there's going to be a bard. Lita, to me, looks a lot like a bard, and I know we've had one before in Nils, but Lita looks a lot more like what comes to mind when you tell me the word bard. He says there's going to be a class called the Vassal, which is the Avatar's class, and the player chooses the weapon type. This did end up happening in 3 houses, but, you know, you're kind of predisposed to swords, so I don't know. I don't think that's a huge claim. He also says there's going to be witches, summoners, and succubi. Bold if true. I don't have any reason yet to think this is true, other than we have vampires, so maybe a succubi is not too far. We've had witches and summoners before. The succubi thing is the one that I'm really eyeballing, like, are you sure? He then continues the classes and says that we'll have imps that function like a thief. I don't know if that's going to be a human class or he's saying there's a race of imps. Unclear. Don't know. There's going to be a lance-using class called an impaler. Nothing to really speculate on. Moonshifter sounds really weird. Laurel Wreath. Laguz-like, 3 tribes, wolf, bat, dragon. More like the Tagel, Wolfskin, and Kitsune. I have no idea if this is going to be in or not. That's also very bold claim. My guess is that Fortune's Weave takes place in Elmira, and I'm guessing that because it just doesn't look like Fodland. We could, I guess, be in Brigid, but I have no idea where this takes place. I just kind of feel like if there's a bunch of different races of people running around that Fodland and the Church of Saros would know about it, but I guess it's possible that they don't. We're then told that there's Hippogriff Riders, which we've seen before, Dark Riders, which we've also seen before. We're told there's Mermen, another bold claim, but we do see Dietrich on a pirate ship, or a boat of some kind, so we know there's a boat map, but also there's almost always a boat map. There's Phantoms, Vestals, which is a variation of Cleric, and Wizards, which are new names for Dark Mages. All 3 of those last ones, I don't find that interesting. They're all things that we've had before. Next, we move on to the mechanics. We're told it's a balance of old and new mechanics, trying to please both sides of the fanbase. The returning features are supports, with marriages but no children, which does line up with what we ended up getting in 3 Houses. Pair Up, which you might say, well, Pair Up didn't come back. We haven't had that since Fates. Again, I don't know if this guy was looking at stills or the game in motion. If I was looking at stills, I could easily see myself seeing the adjutant system and going, ah, we've got Pair Up again. They do look very similar, even though they play quite differently. We're told that Weapon Triangle is coming back, which didn't end up happening, and I'm still very sad that 3 Houses doesn't have that. And we're also told there's 3 types of magic, Dark, Light, and Anima. This was true, but to me is also not a huge prediction, because that's most Fire Emblems. The rest of the features are that there's wireless multiplayer, a versus mode, double duel, arena, which I would love to see a comeback to, and I mean, since we are fighting in an arena, it's not totally unlikely. And then there's a day-night cycle with stronger monsters appearing at night. Now, I don't know that there's a day-night cycle, but if you look at the bottom left corner here, there is an indicator that it is raining, and I'm wondering if this changes the conditions somehow. It does tell me that the outside environment is coded as a factor here, so nighttime could be a thing. Who knows? That's the end of the leak, and some of you may think I'm crazy here. So let's recap just one more time real fast to see what lines up with the leak and the new game. The game does seem to have vampires. Being tied to 3 houses, it probably does have heavy themes of religion. There is a vampire hunter, there's a hunter class, there's a bard, there's some confusing things going on with multiple protagonists / avatar characters, and one of them is the vampire, and there's a circular meter thing that's orange and purple that could be a sun / moon thing. For me, that's enough pretty specific boxes ticked off that I'm side-eyeing these leaks again and wondering if the leaker actually did see a really early in development version of Fire Emblem 18. But what do you think, dear viewer? Do you think this is somebody that actually saw an early version of the game, or do you think this is somebody that got insanely lucky and that Fire Emblem was always going to have vampires and become a more edgy series? It's entirely possible. I look forward to hashing it out with you in the comments below.